Welcome back to Hammer Rugby. Once again, this week, double treat. I've invited a friend of mine, Benjamin Haswell, a guy that runs a lot of fan pages for the NOLA Gold Rugby, and we had decided to collaborate and each pick our starting 15 from the first half of the season. So we're going to share our thoughts and ideas about who has really stood out in Major League Rugby. So check it out. So let's break down or start the breakdown of our mid-season top 15. We'll go with our front row. We've talked a little bit about it for those fans out there that are watching. So I think when we talked about it, we were in 100% agreement, right?
Absolutely.
Give me. Why don't you break down our front row for the folks watching out there?
Sure. So first of all, I should tell people I'm a scrum half. So knowing nothing about the dark arts, I made a quick phone call to my good friend Sean Malik, who actually played for the New Orleans Championship team back in the day. He now lives in Houston, and so he had no hesitation in picking Jamie Deaver as the loosehead prop from Houston. He says, in his opinion, he's one of the best scrummagers in the league. So I'm going to go with Jamie Deaver at 1. At hooker, I've got Dylan Fawcett. I actually had the privilege of meeting him after New York had that very lucky win against us, you may recall.
Yep.
And he really just impressed me with his mongrel play. Hookers are famous for scoring, flamboyant tries out on the wing and doing all kinds of funny things. But what's impressed me about him, he scores those really, mauling mongrel kind of tries, and that's the kind of hooker that impresses me. And then finally, I had to go with Paddy Ryan. I mean, that's been the universal choice of MLR, and most people agree that he's probably the best tight head in the league.
Yeah, and he's from San Diego Legion. There's a couple of Paddy Ryans playing around the Major League Rugby these days. So
sure.
Okay, so that's our front row. At loosehead, we have Jamie Deaver. At hooker, we have Dylan Fawcett from Rooney. And at tight head, we have Paddy Ryan from the San Diego Legion.
Yeah.
All right. So now on to the second row. Here again, I think we were in agreement on at least one of the players. And Benji had a chance to actually meet this individual and his parents. At number 5, we had Ben Mitchell from Austin Elite. Just chat for a moment about Ben, since you got a chance to meet him.
Sure. I probably spoke to Donna and Pete, his parents, more than Ben himself. Donna and Pete actually rode the bus with us to the game, the fan bus. So it was kind of weird having them on the NOLA Gold fan bus. But, just meeting them and seeing what kind of people that they were. That's the thing about rugby. When you meet somebody and then you meet their parents, it kind of gives you a pretty good indication of what kind of person they are. So if you wonder why Ben Franklin's a really good grounded captain, after meeting his parents, I had no doubt that he's the kind of leader of that team. And Austin Elite are definitely going to do better under his leadership. He's just a fantastic player, leads from the front, just a really gutsy kind of guy with all the skills required.
He seemed to be always stuck in the middle of things on Saturday when they played NOLA. All right, and then the other here, we had a little difference here at number 4. I had Louis Stanfield from San Diego. Who did you have?
Yeah, I went with youth. I went with Nate Brakely. Mm-hmm. And, the reason as I was saying before about why I'm going with youth, I was actually watching the game the other day with Big Red Causey, who was just inducted into the USA Hall of Fame. 6'9", big boy, played for LSU back in the day when my dad started the club. And he was, reflecting at halftime. And when I was talking to him, he was like, man, rugby's really changed. Locks used to, their primary role obviously was the set piece, winning that line-out ball, big scrummaging. And he was reflecting on, and he was actually watching Ben Mitchell, obviously, as was I. And he was saying, man, that's incredible. He on the field like I never used to be able to. He steals possession. He makes tackles. So even Big Red was impressed with how lock play has changed. And that being the fact, I'm going to go with Nate Brakely because I just feel like, locks has actually changed. A guy like Stanfield, fantastic player in his day, but I'm going to say that you need to be more versatile to be a lock in today's MLR.
And Nate looks to be like an heir apparent at second row for the United States as well. So Can't go wrong with that choice. So let's go on a back row. This I think is going to be a critical area as we go into the second half of the season. As we've talked about, the defense is a little bit lacking in a lot of these games, and so the offensively, the back row is going to really have to develop a lot of continuity with some of these teams like NOLA, but more importantly, defense. These guys are really going to have to start shaping up to batten down the defense, especially we get into the championship rounds. So why don't you give me your back row?
Yeah, well, based on what you were just saying, I mean, a lot of people are impressed by the number of tries that we're seeing scored in the MR. And a bunch of those tries are obviously scored by loose forwards. They tend to be your impact player. But we got a player in New Orleans, he's averaging 18 tackles a game. That's not the kind of thing that I guess gets the headlines. But if you wonder why New Orleans is 6-1, it's not only because we've been scoring tries. It's because we have this guy just loitering around the field, just making those critical tackles at critical moments. So I'm going to go ahead and go with Zach as one of my flankers. Yeah. On the other flank, I mean, a really tough choice. You've got some big names like Hancock Hamases, John Quill at Rooney. What a fantastic player. But I finally went with an old guy, ironically, Eric Duschler from Seattle Seawolves. Yeah. Has really impressed me with his consistent play for Seattle. Yep. And finally, once again, another guy from Seattle, and I hope I'm not showing my South African bias, but I'm going to go ahead and go with Riekert Hatting, who for me has been the most dominant physical number 8 in the league so far.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had all three of those players in my starting 15 as well. Duchel has a storming runs. Hatting runs real well off the back of their scrum and is able to take that initial hit and recycle ball. So, and of course Zach is leading the leading tackles. So you can't thumb your nose at that. That's got to be acknowledged someplace.
Just one point I want to make with reference to that, though. I mean, anytime you're looking at combinations, you have to give credit to a team like Rooney. They seem to have really got their loose combination right. Yeah. So if you ask me which combination the league is playing as a unit, it's definitely got to be Rooney. And you got to consider you got a tremendous player like Matt Houston on the bench for them. He was Nola Gold's best player last year, I don't mind saying. So for him to be on the bench shows you that Rooney really have got a tremendous combination going there. So, you got to think about stuff like that when you're selecting these teams. We pick them individually, but let's definitely think about the combinations.
Yeah, absolutely. And none of those guys that Rooney has starting really on their own stands out, other than who's the open side that's really been playing well for them, that scored a couple of tries. James Dennis. Denise is how you pronounce name. He's really done well, but they play. You're right. They play well as a unit. They're as a unit, yeah. And I think that's going to bode well for them going into the second half.
And there it is, our pack. We pretty much agreed on all positions with the exception at the lock. So number 1, Jamie Deaver. Number 2, Dylan Fawcett. The Butcher, Patty Ryan at the tight head. Where we disagreed was over Louis Stanfield from San Diego and Nate Brakely from Rooney. Nate is actually going to be starting at the flank for Rooney this weekend. And then Ben Mitchell. At back row, we had Eric Duchel, Riekert Hatting, and Zach Streifler. There you have it, our starting forwards.
Now, you're a former scrum half. Who do you like in the league?
Really put me on the hot seat there, but when you look at scrum halves, you've got to give respect to some of the doyens of the game there. You got Phil Mack, you got Mike Petrie. Those are the guys week in, week out. You're getting consistent performances out of them. Speaking of that, we've got a youngster down in New Orleans that maybe doesn't get enough credit. Holden Youngett's played every single game, every single minute, until maybe that last minute the other day when, as you know, with the substitute came on and got the score. Yeah. But Holden really doesn't get the recognition he deserves, in my opinion. Scrum half is one of the tough positions you play. You might have seen Holden get out the other day. Scrum halves have a tendency to put a big target on their back on account of the fact that they can't really keep their mouth shut. But Holden, for me, has been a consistent performer and really deserves it, in my opinion, to be considered an up-and-coming scrum half in this league.
Yeah, he's about as tough as they come, I will say that. All right, so I actually had Mike Petrie. He leads his forwards and links up with his backs very well. Kind of an old guard, you're going young, I'm going old.
No.
Just
but I think both of them have shown their quality this season. And then at number 10, I went with Sam Windsor from Houston.
Yeah. Yeah, just a consistent, gives you exactly what you want out of a fly-off in terms of just kicking all those points, just building up the points. But his general play is obviously improving over time. I went with the old guy once again. The bias comes through, and I go with Joe Peterson.
From San Diego.
South African, though. But if you've looked at the San Diego Legion,
yeah.
Supposed to be the guy who controls the game and really makes his mark. And I can't think of a game where San Diego managed to win the game where he didn't have a big piece of it. And so for me, he's getting a bit old in the tooth, but a really cerebral player, thinks really well on his feet. And so maybe I've got the old guy hanging on, but certainly a tough choice amongst the flower.
He gives us old guys a little bit something to cheer for, doesn't he?
There we go.
All right, and then at number 15, I was kind of torn. I had a couple guys on my list, and I know who you're going to select. And he was right there in my thought, but I went with Dylan Tykado Simpson. I think he showed a lot in a few games, particularly against Rooney. Very dynamic, was able to slip through some breaks, and was a bright spot for Glendale last week. And you, of course, went with.
Well, I'm going to go with JP.
Yeah.
JP, I mean, you selected an awesome fullback there as well. JP, I want to say to you, has many of those same skills. He can really just slice through the line. But, people have been asking me, why do you think NOLA keep their heads about them when they're down, a try going to the last 3 quarters? If you have a conversation with JP Eloff, whether you're on the field or off it, he is so calm and collected. It's just something in his nature, calming effect around him. And so the captaincy, NOLA goal, critical reason for our success. And because of that, more than anything else, I've got to go with JP Eloff. He is a consistent performer. I don't understand, to be honest with you, why the American Eagles haven't come looking for him.
Yeah,
because to me, he really settles the team down. And we saw during the ARC tournament, the United States team just couldn't seem to keep their heads about them.
Yeah.
JP is a cool customer. And when I was playing rugby anyway, I always felt a lot more reassured knowing that I had a fullback behind me who wasn't going to panic under any circumstance.
He's really good under the high ball, and he slices through defenses. My only reservation is there were a number of times in which he didn't quite make touch from inside their 22 and allowed for a counterattack. And that can, as a NOLA fan, that concerns me going into the later rounds. So I'd like to see him clean that up a bit myself.
Absolutely. And he's missed a number of critical kicks at goal as well, which has forced NOLA Golf often to kick for touch when other people are saying, man, why didn't we just kick the 3? If there's one thing that kind of makes me nervous about his play so far is that lack of consistency in the kicking game. And that's certainly something that I know JP knows he needs to work on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because the last the 2 games that they've won right at the wire, they had opportunities to kick for points, and I think they were easy. I think JP could have easily made them, but it almost seems like their philosophy of they're just going to go for the throat. They're going to let it all hang out, and they're just going to go for the win. And maybe that's why they're.
I think they might also captain show confidence in his team. It's one thing to be in yourself, but it's quite another as a captain to, put that ball in the corner and say, listen, forwards, finish it off.
Right.
And as you know, JP's been doing it, and so far he's mostly getting away with it. So
yeah,
got to take my.
We'll take it. So, all right, I'm going to put her on pause here, and then we'll go to our wings. Okay, and next up we've got the center combination. It's interesting. I think Benji here shows his acuity with an understanding of back play here with his combination. So why don't you talk about your 12 and 13 if you wouldn't mind?
Well, I think everybody knows I'm already going to go with Tristan Blewett at 13. He's the GOAT, and that's why I got the GOAT behind me. You might notice with the Springbok trimming. Tristan Blewett actually played for my home university. My brother was actually the manager of the Natal University team that Tristan played for when he played in the Varsity Shield tournament back home. So I've been following Tristan for some time, and it was no surprise to me that he turned out to be the player that he is. A lot of people have been saying he's tremendous on the wing. Yes, he is a very, very quick player. But what they did see when he moved to the center was, once again, he can slice right through a gap, and he can also make a lot of tackles. One of the reasons maybe that Tristan Blurt is in America is because back home in South Africa, there's still an obsession with size. People are convinced that somehow if you're smaller, you can't make your tackles. But anybody that's played rugby knows you tackle hard and low, they're going down. And if you watch Tristan Blurt, his tackling technique can't be questioned. So he's definitely my number 13. But with respect to that, good center needs a who can put him in the holes. Right. And so I looked around the league, haven't seen a lot of the Canadians, but the Toronto Arrows, Giuseppe Dutoy is that person for me who can kind of create something for his partner. So I'm going to go with Dutoy and Blewett as my centers.
Yeah, I had Tristan as well at 13, and I kind of I cheated and went with Mark O'Keefe, although he's not really an inside center; he's an outside center. So I'll defer to you and Giuseppe Dutoy. All right, so we got our center combination. Okay, and last but not least, we have our positions that have the air for the flamboyant, our wingers. And on the wing, I think we had guys that weren't really your typical wingers. These guys are workhorses, and I know we agreed upon one of them, and that was Brock Stoller. Tremendous with the kick, big guy. I really like what he does on the wing. He's always a threat to score. He scored a breakaway intercept try that was critical in I think the third week. Right. So he's impressed me.
Yeah, he's just racking up the points. I mean, at the end of the day, a winger's got to be a finisher, and Brock just finds a way to finish. Yeah. And obviously, the fact that he can make kicks a goal the way he does makes him just an all-round performer in this league so far. Just one of the leaders in the league.
Now, who did you have at the other wing?
With the other wing, I went with the All-American boy, Harley Davidson. Yeah. With a name like that, I just felt like if you're talking about flamboyant, I had to go with him. There's a number of other wingers that I've been impressed with, but once again, we talk about finishing. For me, Harley Davidson gets the job done.
Yeah, I like Harley Davidson. He showed me a lot in the last match against Glendale. Really elusive. I've always been impressed throughout the season with John Ryberg. He was injured this last weekend, which is why Harley was slotted in. But John's a bowling pin of a guy, 5'10", probably 225, and still has got some speed and pace on the outside, but he's tough to take down. I've really been impressed with him throughout the season.
Sure, fantastic player, no question. Anytime you put a team like this together, I'm sure there's going to be people watching back home who have their favorites.
Yeah.
And I think what's important to realize is all of us are learning. I haven't got to see as much of the Canadians, for instance, as I would like to. I feel like with all their home games, all of us are going to have to probably make a few changes because maybe we just haven't seen enough of the Toronto Arrows so far. But, the fantastic thing about this league is not only the parity between the teams, but also the fact that so many stars are emerging pretty much for every team. I don't think there's a single team in the league that I can honestly say there's not at least one or two guys that could make our 15 today.
Yeah. And my hope is that moving forward that the USA Eagles selectors have a lot more wide variety of players to select from, and they're not so focused as they had been 20 or 30 years ago on West Coast and Jack Clark and Cal, that they start to open up and widen their view of who's available. And you mentioned JP as somebody that should be in there, and certainly we've seen a lot from Ben Seaman. We've seen Chris Mattis at fly half from Rooney. So hopefully these guys will get a better look from Eagle selectors.
Yeah, I don't mind saying in the tent after you talk to old fans, what they're most aware of is how we have that perception down south anyway that we are being overlooked. And it's not helped by the fact that Houston and Austin have been struggling. So right. We're very aware, Nola Gold, that we're kind of flying the flag. And we feel like, hopefully with our record, maybe some of our players are finally going to get the recognition that they deserve.
So the backs is where we disagreed the most. Benji and I had Mike Petrie from Rooney. He had Holden Youngert from NOLA. I had Sam Windsor at fly half
from Houston. He had Joe Peterson from San Diego. I'll give him a nod to Giuseppe DeToy from Toronto. I had O'Keefe at inside center. We agreed with Tristan Blewett at outside center. He's been playing phenomenally, runs great lines for NOLA. We also agreed at Brock Stoller on the wing. We disagreed at the other wing. I had Rydberg and he had Harley Davidson, both actually from Glendale. And we also disagreed at the fullback position. I had Dylan Tykado Simpson and he had NOLA's JP Eloff. There it is, our starting 15 from mid-season in MLR action. Week 10 should be an excellent weekend for MLR action. Start off your second half of the season just right. Pay attention to the starting 15 and some of the players both Benji and I mentioned, and see if those players continue to shine through the second half. Enjoy it.